The Lead with Jake Tapper comes from Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. When it comes to the big decision of choosing a mortgage lender, work with one that has your best interests in mind. Use Rocket Mortgage for a transparent, trustworthy home loan process that's completely online at quickenloans.com/thelead.
Baldwin, The Lead with Jake Tapper starts now.
Thanks, Brooke. Do you think Don Rickles got to heaven and started insulting St. Peter? Rest in peace, Mr. Rickles. The Lead starts right now. Putting America first to the test. President Trump now says, quote, something should happen to Syria's dictator after that horrific chemical weapons attack this week. Is the U.S. military getting ready to strike? And what's different about this chemical weapons attack than the one President Trump didn't want responded to in 2013? Bowing out. Why did the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee step aside from the investigation into Russia's meddling in the election weeks after his secret meeting at the White House? And this is hardly fake news. A high school newspaper uncovers some shady truths about the new principal. Now she has resigned, and she would have gotten away with it, too, if it weren't for those meddling kids. We'll talk to the teenage journalists about what they found and how. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We're going to begin with our world lead today after a devastating chemical weapons attack in the suburbs of Damascus in 2013 that killed around 1,400 Syrians. Donald Trump told President Obama he would be a fool to strike Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who was thought to be responsible for the attack. Just days ago, members of the Trump administration were saying that removing Assad was no longer a priority. But now, after another chemical weapons attack, this one killing nearly 100 people, President Trump just minutes ago told reporters that, quote, something should happen regarding Assad. A source telling CNN that the president also told some members of Congress today that he is considering military action against the Syrian regime. Let's get right to CNN's Jim Acosta in Palm Beach, Florida, where Mr. Trump just landed for meetings with the Chinese president. Jim, what can you tell us about anything we might know about President Trump's plans for Syria?
Well, we can tell you, Jake, that now that the president is on the ground here in Florida for this meeting with the Chinese president Xi Jinping, the president is planning on holding a meeting with some of his national security team later on this evening. Those officials, including the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. He's also expected to talk to the Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, as well as other members of the cabinet, Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary. That meeting expected to take place later on this evening, according to a White House official. Now, as you mentioned, Jake, just a few moments ago, the president landed in Florida. He did talk to reporters on Air Force One about the situation in Syria. And as you just said a few moments ago, it does appear that the calculus, that the equation for this administration has changed very much when it comes to this question of Syria after the apparent chemical weapons attack conducted by the Syrian regime against civilians just a few days ago. The president now telling reporters on Air Force One, now signaling to the world that something should happen to Syria as a response to that chemical weapons attack. Here's what he had to say.
Do you think Assad should leave power, and will you discuss Syria?
I think what Assad did is terrible. I think what happened in Syria is one of the truly egregious crimes, and it shouldn't have happened, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Do you think that Assad should leave power in Syria?
I think what happened in Syria is a disgrace to humanity, and he's there, and I guess he's running things, so something should happen.
Now, just before the president landed here in Florida for this meeting with the Chinese president, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson gave what was a very extraordinary news conference and talked to reporters about his current thinking when it comes to Syria's leader Bashar al-Assad. Jake, it was just last week when Secretary of State Tillerson told reporters, said to the world, that perhaps Bashar al-Assad will be staying in Syria, that the U.S. will not be pursuing a regime change policy against Bashar al-Assad. But he made it very clear during his comments to the media this afternoon that not only does the U.S. believe that Assad is responsible for that chemical weapons attack, that something should happen, that something should take place in terms of a military response. He even went as far as to say, Jake, that the U.S. is talking with its partners, with international partners, didn't specify which ones, about some kind of military response to Bashar al-Assad. That is just an extraordinary reversal for an administration that just last week, Jake, was talking about leaving Bashar al-Assad in power.
All right, Jim Acosta in Palm Beach with the president. Thank you so much. Exactly what military options might President Trump have if he does decide to strike the Syrian regime after this horrific chemical weapons attack on its own people? Let's get right to CNN's Barbara Starr. She's at the Pentagon for us. Barbara, when asked today if Assad should leave power, President Trump, as you heard, said something should happen. Previous presidents have attempted to get international support, including military support, before launching any sort of campaign. Is that on the agenda for President Trump and his administration?
Well, Jake, I don't know that he feels he needs international support. There's a lot of international condemnation already about this attack. You'll remember citizen Donald Trump advised President Obama not to militarily go into Syria. Now that Mr. Trump is president, he is beginning to have quite a different view. A grieving father cradling his dead children. As the death toll rises, more bodies recovered, 86 murdered, including 26 children. Tonight, the Trump administration is considering airstrikes against Bashar al-Assad's regime in direct retaliation for bombing with nerve agent here in northern Syria's Idlib province.
We are considering an appropriate response for this chemical weapons attack, which violates all previous UN resolutions, violates international norms and long-held agreements between parties, including the Syrian regime, the Russian government, and all other members of the UN Security Council. It's a serious matter. It requires a serious response.
Radar tracks show regime planes were in the air at the time of the attack. Heat signatures show those planes dropped bombs on areas where civilians suffered exposure to nerve agent. Military commanders have long-standing options for attacking Assad. President Trump could authorize a limited strike, hitting airfields where the attacking aircraft launched. But Assad can still use artillery and rocket shells filled with deadly agent and barrel bombs thrown out of helicopters.
They can be reconstructed anywhere. It's not like there's a factory where these are being produced. So you may send a signal, but it isn't going to likely affect their capability of continuing to do these kind of things to the civilian environment of Syria.
The U.S. military has warships and aircraft in the area ready to go. In the Mediterranean, U.S. Navy warships, the USS Ross and USS Porter, could fire Tomahawk cruise missiles. The U.S. could also fly stealth aircraft, B-2 bombers with relative safety to strike targets. President Trump says his opposition to going into Syria has changed.
When you kill innocent children, innocent babies, little babies, with a chemical gas that is so lethal, people were shocked to hear what gas it was. That crosses many, many lines, beyond the red line, many, many lines.
One of the big challenges for the military right now, however, will be to make sure if they do get the order to strike, that they don't inadvertently strike areas where Russian troops are on the ground. Jake?
All right, Barbara Starr at the Pentagon for us. Thank you. So just what options in Syria would Congress be willing to approve? Will they even be brought into the loop? We'll talk to the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee next. Stay with us.
Support for The Lead with Jake Tapper comes from Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. When it comes to the big decision of choosing a mortgage lender, work with one that has your best interests in mind. Rocket Mortgage provides a transparent online process that helps you understand all the details of your home loan. You can even adjust the rate and length of your loan in real time to make sure you get the right mortgage solution for you. Skip the bank, skip the waiting, and go completely online at quickenloans.com/thelead. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Welcome back to The Lead. President Trump is considering military action against the Syrian regime after a suspected chemical weapons attack against its own people. Joining me now to discuss all this, Senator Bob Corker, Republican of Tennessee, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, as always, thanks for joining us.
Jake, always good to be with you. Thank you.
So it's very clear that the president is considering some sort of response, some sort of retaliation, attack, whatever you want to call it, against Assad and his forces after the chemical weapons attack. He says something should happen. What would you advise him to do?
Well, I think it's, first of all, he has military leaders developing that. I would advise him certainly to come to Congress with that. I think that, that's obviously what we did back in 2013. Unfortunately, President Obama didn't pursue that route, and this is what's led to where we are today. But I would say, look, listen to your advisors. I think something is appropriate now. I absolutely do. I did then, back in 2013. Obviously, it'd be good to get the international community with us, or many members, other allies with us in this. And it needs to be proportional. Obviously, the American people are not interested in some ground war or something that's long-term, but I think an appropriate response is necessary. And I think one of those, by the way, is Russia, who wants to be on the world stage. They should show that they're worthy of being on the world stage by withdrawing all support for Assad. So that's a whole nother step that needs to be taken, and I would hope the president and other civilized countries would be encouraging Putin to do the same.
Do you think, when you say that you want President Trump to come to Congress, are you saying that he should seek a vote, an authorization for the use of military force?
So, we, back in 2013, just comparatively, there was a 10-hour operation that was planned off the Mediterranean. The president did come and seek an authorization for the use of force. I always think that's healthy. We passed one out of our committee. It was never taken up on the floor because the president went in another direction. And obviously, that's where the red line problem began. Here, yes, I would, at a minimum, depending on, again, I don't know what kind of action we're talking about here, okay? It may be such that that's not necessary, that just informing those who are in these particular areas of what he thinks he may do. But again, it's hard to respond to that, Jake, because I don't really know what it is that they may be considering doing.
The president said that the attack that happened this week changed his view on Syria and Assad. In 2013, as you no doubt remember, Assad was blamed for killing more people than this week's attack, 1,400 people in a chemical weapon attack. CNN aired those awful videos showing Syrians foaming at the mouth, convulsing, dying. Right. Back then, when President Obama was debating retaliation, as you've often referenced, President Trump tweeted repeatedly urging him to not take action.
Yeah.
People are allowed to change their minds. I understand that. But what's different about this attack for President Trump that changes his way of thinking?
I don't know, but I was just sharing with others in the last meeting I was in. To me, this was a very clarifying moment for the president. I've seen him evolve, Jake, in a good way on China, evolve in a good way on NATO, evolve in a good way on Israel. And I think that this moment of really sort of moral clarity, which I think, the president has come into office and maybe not had the experiences of those of us who've seen these people in refugee camps, have seen what this monster Assad has done in torturing people. And I think this was a clarifying moment for him, and I think it's real, by the way. And for the good of our country, for him to understand that our great nation, with the values that we espouse and have, cannot stand for people to be chemical weaponed in this way. To me, that's very clarifying. And obviously, I hope that he will keep his rhetoric low. I hope that he doesn't make, and I haven't heard him do that, but keep his rhetoric low, listen to military and other advisors, and then let's figure out what is appropriate to happen here.
In terms of how clarifying this is, I just wonder if you still have any concerns, given that I've heard you criticize Syria's, Assad's patron, Putin, and Russia. I heard UN Ambassador Nikki Haley criticize Russia. I have not heard President Trump hold Putin or Russia responsible in any way. He's been far more critical of Barack Obama on this issue than Vladimir Putin. Why?
Yeah, I don't know. I have seen, by the way, an evolution even in Russia. I'd like to see more. Look, I'm just being honest with you. I was very concerned in the beginning that there may be an attempt to do some cheap deal with Russia relative to Ukraine and Crimea. in Syria, and I don't think there's any chance of that now. I think the president is, the longer he's in office, the more he has people coming in to see him from other countries. I think that he's developing a body of knowledge and experience that will keep anything like that from occurring, and he'll have an opportunity to see firsthand right now. I mean, is Putin going to stand behind this sordid monster? Is he going to do that? And I think this will be another one of those, as we've used in the past, one of those educational moments for him.
All right, Senator Bob Corker, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Democrats and Republicans both going to extremes on the Judge Gorsuch Supreme Court confirmation, but which party will be damaged the most by breaking decades of precedent? Stay with us. We're back now with the politics lead and the drama playing out in the U.S. Senate. The rules were just changed on how the Senate approves Supreme Court justice nominees, with both sides using historic and some might say extreme measures. Democrats tried to filibuster the vote against Judge Neil Gorsuch, a move rarely ever used against Supreme Court nominees and not successfully used since 1968. That quickly led Republicans, the majority party, to invoke the so-called nuclear option, changing the rules of the Senate before the minority party could demand a cloture vote requiring 60 votes before proceeding to the up or down vote on a nominee. But now it will take only 51 senators to start the whole process. CNN Sunlen Serfati joins me now live on Capitol Hill. And Sunlen, some Republicans celebrated ending the filibuster. We saw some slaps of 5 by Mr. McConnell, but Democrats and even some Republicans are calling this a sad day for the Senate.
That's right, Jake. One Democrat afterwards declaring that the dark deed is done. But as you noted, Republicans, too, admitting some concern that this places even less emphasis on forging compromise up here on Capitol Hill. And that has some serious implications for the Senate beyond just talking about Supreme Court nominees. Here's some of the rhetoric in the halls of Congress today.
I think it's a very sad day for the Senate because we have now destroyed 200 years of tradition.
A lot more partisan, and that's unfortunate. The Senate should be different. That Senate should not be the House with a 6-year term.
Well, I think we've already slid down the slope. I mean, Harry Reid decided that executive nominations would be done by simple majority, and we just simply went with a Harry Reid rule today.
So, Senator Paul, they're arguing that the need for compromise was something that was already being deteriorated by the Democrats back in 2013. Certainly a lot of blame to go on around up here. Jake.
All right, Sunlen Serfati, Capitol Hill for us. Thank you so much. About 2 weeks after his secret White House meeting, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Devin Nunes, is stepping aside from the Russia investigation. Why? Stay with us. Welcome back to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. The House committee investigating any possible collusion between President Trump and his team with Russian officials and others known to U.S. intelligence is undergoing more upheaval after embattled Chairman Devin Nunes stepped aside this morning pending an ethics committee inquiry. CNN senior congressional reporter Manu Raju is live for us on Capitol Hill. Manu, I have to say I was surprised. I saw the complaint from the good government groups against Nunes, but I didn't think they would necessarily be taken all that seriously by the ethics committee, and I certainly didn't think it would lead to Nunes recusing himself.
Well, Jake, you're not the only one who's surprised. Even members of Nunes' own intelligence committee were surprised at a closed-door meeting earlier today. Nunes abruptly left, and then members learned when they were handed a press release with a statement from Nunes saying that he was going to step aside. Now, Jake, this revelation that the House Ethics Committee is investigating whether or not Mr. Nunes revealed any classified information just became the latest in a string of controversies that became too much for Nunes to sustain. Tonight, the embattled chairman of the House Intelligence Committee forced to step aside from leading the investigation into Russia amid growing accusations that he had grown too close to the White House.
Strict procedures for
already under siege, Congressman Devin Nunes facing a new problem, a House ethics investigation into whether he improperly disclosed classified information about top secret intelligence, with comments like this.
This is information that was brought to me that I thought the president needed to know about incidental collection, where the president himself and others in the Trump transition team were clearly put into intelligence reports that ended up at this White House and across a whole bunch of other agencies.
Leaving the Capitol Thursday, Nunes refused to answer any questions. But he released a statement blaming left-wing groups for making false and politically motivated accusations. Still, he said it was in the best interest to let Congressman Mike Conaway lead the committee's investigation into Russia and the Trump campaign. The news stunned members of the Intelligence Committee, who only learned of the decision after staff handed them Nunes' statement once he abruptly left a closed-door meeting.
We were all caught a little bit off guard. I think now the investigation can proceed.
It marked a dramatic shift from a week ago, when Nunes defiantly rejected calls to step aside amid his decision to cancel a public hearing that could have provided more information on Russia's alleged coordination with Trump associates. Are you going to stay as chairman and run this investigation?
Well, why would I not? You guys need to go ask them why why these things are being said.
But they're saying that it cannot run as chair with you as chairman.
You got to go talk to them. That sounds like their problem.
House Speaker Paul Ryan privately met with Nunes last night and said he supports the chairman's decision.
Chairman Nunes wants to make sure that this is not a distraction to a very important investigation.
But neither Ryan nor his aides would say if the speaker urged Nunes to step aside.
Did you urge Nunes to step aside, sir? Did you urge him to?
Nunes had grown weary as his explanation shifted on whether the White House had given him intelligence so he could provide cover to President Trump's unsubstantiated charge that former President Obama had Trump Tower wiretapped. On Tuesday...
Can you just stop for a second? I'll just take one quick second.
No, I got to get into the...
And on Wednesday...
We're not going to talk about anything to do with this investigation.
Now, Jake, another question tonight is whether or not Mr. Nunes will still receive that top secret information that he and other leaders of Congress get in the so-called Gang of Eight. And also we're learning tonight that intelligence officials had been resistant to giving Nunes and the Intelligence Committee information that could help with their Russia probe because they were concerned about the actions that he took last month. We'll see, though, if his decision to step aside changes that at all. Jake.
All right, Mani Raju on Capitol Hill for us. Thank you. Joining me now to discuss this and the broader investigation, former CIA Director James Woolsey served as a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. Ambassador, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
So Congressman Nunes stepped aside from chairing the committee's Russia probe. Do you think that there needs to be an independent commission, or do you think that Congress and the FBI will be able to sort this out?
I think they should be able to sort it out. I think this is, frankly, overall a minor matter, and the reason both you and I were surprised at what happened was, I think, partly related to that. There is something very important in our electoral politics involving Russia, but it's not this year. It's a year and a half from now when we go to an election where 25% of our voting machines don't leave a paper trail, and most of those can be hacked. And certainly the ones that have a paper trail, that helps. You can have a recount. But for 25% of our voting machines, Russia may be controlling things with its hacking a lot more than any American would want. That's the problem involving Russia. It's not this kind of silly back and forth that we've been focused on Capitol Hill.
Okay, so that's a good point for the future in terms of the FBI investigation and the Senate and House Intelligence Committee's investigation and looking into the role that Russia played and whether there was any collusion, in the words, or coordination, in the words of the FBI director. What do you make as an intelligence expert of the fact that there were all these meetings and contacts between Trump campaign officials and associates such as Jared Kushner, then Senator Jeff Sessions, Carter Page, Eric Prince, Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, with Russians known to the U.S. government?
I don't make a lot out of that. People in Washington, in all parts of the government and all parts of the diplomatic corps, are always exchanging ideas with one another, meeting one another, talking all the time. And I think that this particular one is something that has several aspects of it that are different than what we've seen before, but nothing that suggests to me success in or near success in being able to actually control how votes go in an election. That's the key thing.
You don't think the information war, the fake news and the hacking of the real emails and distribution is significant enough?
The Russians have had recently, and before them the Soviets for a long time, a program called disinformation. Essentially, it's doing this sort of thing. What's fouling up people's elections and so forth. In Western Europe, they've been very vigorous in Western Europe for decades. What is new is cyber. Adding cyber to that and giving people the ability to hack into an electoral system, not change a few votes in Chicago here and there by bribing someone, but rather really changing our elections. That's what's new. And that's why people are worried this year, but they really ought to be a lot more worried a year and a half from now.
Switching gears, let's talk about Syria, if you would. What would you advise President Trump to do about Syria and about the chemical weapons attack against the Syrian people by the Syrian regime?
Well, I don't think there is going to be any very good answer by talking. Assad does not care what we do. Russia is not going to change its support, and Iran is certainly not going to change its support of Assad. Assad is kind of Iran's poodle, mainly in this whole world. And I think that it would be really very important to plan, whether they carry it out or not is another matter, but to plan very seriously for a major military strike against the parts of the Iranian infrastructure that are headed toward nuclear weapons. The nuclear agreement that we have with them is, I think, worse than worthless. And on their way in and their way out, if our forces do use air power against Iran, would be possible to knock out some of the Syrian facilities too. But we are down to a situation where we will see a nuclear Iran, I think, very shortly because of bad decisions that have been made in the past, unless we do something. And this at least gives us an opportunity to do something that is tied to the Syrian events, and that would be use force against the Iranian nuclear program.
I certainly don't need to lecture a former CIA director on the notion of blowback, but are you not worried that a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, as well as some Syrian military facilities, would create a huge amount of upheaval and perhaps put the United States and its allies in greater peril than what you're suggesting?
There's nothing about this situation that I find at all comfortable, whether it's using force or trying to get out of it by talking diplomatically. But I see no way in which arguing with Russians, talking even to Iranians, getting coalitions together, people are just not going to respond effectively in the United Nations or elsewhere to that kind of a complaint, even as terrible as what the Syrians did was. It's not going to do any good. And if we want to change the nature of the threat to us in that part of the world, I think what we have to do is take out the Iranian nuclear program, and if we can, without hitting any Russian units and so forth, some of the Syrian capabilities.
All right, Ambassador James Woolsey, thank you so much. We always appreciate your time, sir.
Good to be with you.
High school journalists take on the principal after her resume raised many red flags. They tell us what caught their eye and made them call out the very person who might suspend them from school. And then he was the master of the insult. Legendary comedian Don Rickles passes away. We'll take a look at how he made us laugh. Stick around. Welcome back to The Lead. I'm joined now by my political roundtable, so let's dive in. President Trump is now considering military action against the Syrian regime. And I have to say, I guess I'm not surprised that he has so starkly changed his position from what he was saying just a few days ago. But it's almost as if the way they're reacting to this chemical weapons attack in Syria, which was horrific, it's almost as if they're not aware that Syria has been doing this since 2013.
Well, look, yes, he does change his position. I'm not sure that he will stick with this position for a very long time. But I think the central issue, I'm not an anti-interventionist, but I'm cautious about what we can accomplish in a theater that's this complicated and how you do it. But I think the one thing you need is actually constancy from an American leader to say, this is a fight worth fighting. It is in our interest for these reasons. And right now, the moral problem of Syria and this genocide is running up against the political problem of no one to convince the American people that this is worth blood and treasure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat reassured, but also somewhat scared that President Trump seems to be learning about foreign policy on the job. Okay, but he saw those pictures and you saw him in front of the cameras. He seemed emotionally affected. It really got to him. He changed from, I don't want to be president of the world, to, this is my responsibility. Those are the words he used. That means something. What that did internally was everybody who works on national security in the White House, in the NSC, in the State Department, they switched. They turned on a dime from a policy that was ISIS only. We'll worry about Assad another time.
Yeah, we'll cooperate with Russia and theoretically
it's
maybe even Assad to go after ISIS.
This presidency is about the president. He set the tone, and now everyone's scrambling to come up with these options. And when it all shakes out, they'll have two basic courses of action. Escalate or do what we've been doing and accept the consequences. It's the same choice that President Obama had. It's the same choice that Trump has. It's more difficult now, but the consequences of inaction are also more drastic than they've ever been.
Maybe when President Obama was facing the same basic decision in September 2013, Donald Trump businessman was tweeting at him, don't go to war, don't bomb Syria, don't do it, it's foolish. This is now actually... this is a chemical weapons attack where almost 100 people died this week. Horrible, but it's not the first, and frankly, it's not the worst. The one in August, 2013 was worse.
That's what's so remarkable about the way that we see his reaction, as if it's kind of new, and he hasn't been following this civil war that's 7 years old and 500,000 people have died. He weighed in on this. At that moment of that turning point moment, telling our foolish leader, he called President Obama at the time, not to get in there. There's no upside. And then he mocked him since for backing away from a red line, including yesterday in front of King Abdullah. I mean, he didn't only do it in a statement 2 days ago. He did it again yesterday. He couldn't resist the temptation. And it's really hard, I think Mary Catherine's right, to see if he can actually stick with this through next week, particularly because the Secretary of State's going to go to Russia. What is this administration asking of the Russians in Syria? Get out of Syria? Join us in a coalition for regime change? This is the huge question, is what, are we going to go to war with the Russians? Right. And I think we don't know the answers, and I don't think they know the answers.
Well, I think there's only one thing they can really ask from the Russians, which is put pressure on Assad, okay? This is the same thing we've been asking Russia for the last 6 years. They're not going to do it. No. Then they're going to be put to a choice. Okay, do we increase the pressure and take risks, even if that means more arming of the opposition, more covert action, sanctions, whatever it is? There's a whole litany of things you can do. Each of those has risks. There's also risks of inaction, and those risks are more terrorism, more refugees, and extremism just growing throughout the region. So, in the end, he's going to have to choose one of these two basic paths. If he wants to really get out of Syria, he's going to have to escalate to de-escalate. And he's coming around to that, and you can see it in real time on TV, and now he just has to get the whole system geared up to enact that policy.
I just think it's really tough, and I come back to the part where you do have to sell the American people on your strategy.
And there's none of that. There's none of that.
Well, and also there are risks of doing the international community thing and sort of lauding, as Kerry did, this deal that they had on chemical weapons back in the day, which was not actually a deal. So that carries risks as well. I am unsure whether Trump has a grasp of all the strategies that are available to him, but I do think it's really important that the American people be informed of them in a real way, and have this debate and agree to it, and have a guy who is willing to push through with
and
the
that's what President Obama never did, and that's why people like President Trump, when he was a citizen, didn't understand the issue. So if he really wants to do this, he's going to have to bring the American people along.
So let's turn for a second to what's going on in the House Intelligence Committee, just because I think it was really surprising I know it was surprising to me. I did not expect Congressman Nunes to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. AB, what happened here? Was it really these left-leaning good government groups complaining about Nunes to the Ethics Committee, or did Speaker Ryan say, you've cast too much of a cloud over this investigation?
I think it was a combination. I think that there was already a protest in his district, and there were going to be more. They're going to go home for a recess, and he was going to face a lot of heat. Probably Republicans on the Intel Committee might have had the same protest. You need to abandon your chairman. I think internally, I spoke to a member who's very fond of Nunes, who knew what Ryan's thinking was just a few nights ago, who said, Ryan, of course he's going to stick by him unless it becomes a big problem. And I think possibly Republicans just went to Ryan and said, this is just becoming too much. And members even who are fond of Nunes really acknowledged openly, they didn't want to do it on camera, but privately, that he made a mess of this. And he did a great disservice to himself and the investigation. He mishandled the entire thing. And I think they just didn't want to answer those questions at home on the recess, and Nunes knew that.
He's very well regarded personally. People do like him a lot. They think he's a nice and decent man. But Nunes seemed to think that this was just causing too much of a problem for his fellow members on the committee.
Right, and I'm somebody who wanted the information that he brought forward to Trump and to the press out there and cares about it because I care about
although the White House
how these tools are used, right? But did he go about in the correct way? I don't actually think he did, and I think he created this problem for himself. Politically speaking, not morally speaking, I think he had probably gotten to a point where he could have weathered it, maybe. In the quickness of our news cycles these days, I am not buying that people can't get past these things anymore. So I thought it was an interesting choice, and it may have been because he truly thought that morally he had gotten in the way of it.
Yes, he could have weathered it, but the investigation would not be seen as credible. And at the end of the day, what the American people need is an accounting of what happened in that election. And you can throw in the allegations of collusion and the Susan Rice stuff and all of that. There was no way that Devin Nunes was going to be able to complete an investigation that the American people could look at and say, okay, that's the final word. We trust that was independent and credible.
No,
so stepping aside.
I was counting the ship sailed on that and just looking at the Senate.
Well, I still have hope that somehow we'll figure out what happened.
All right, thanks one and all. Appreciate it. They may only be in high school, but don't call these young journalists fake newsies. How their story ended up exposing lies that were on their new principal's resume. Stay with us.
30 years ago, you were handsome, and now we're going to put Goodyear on your face and fly over the beach for a half hour.
Welcome back to The Lead, our pop culture lead now. Legendary comedian and masterful insult artist Don Rickles has died of kidney failure at the age of 90. For any of you hockey pucks out there who aren't familiar, the King of Zing from Queens, New York, was discovered by Frank Sinatra in 1957 and has entertained audiences with his potent one-liners ever since.
And I want you to know something. From my heart, I never liked you.
That was Jimmy Fallon. But today, fellow comedian Jimmy Kimmel tweeted out this afternoon, 90 years with Don Rickles weren't enough. Now on to our national lead in the tale of a powerful figure brought down by journalists, in this case, high school journalists from Pittsburgh, Kansas, writing about their incoming school principal, Amy Robertson, who had been hired last month, but the students writing for their school paper, The Booster Redux, discovered that Cortland University, Robertson's alma mater, was not accredited. Further investigation raised more questions than answers about their new principal's credentials. Their story was published last Friday. Robertson resigned Tuesday. And two of the student journalists join me now. We have with us Trina Paul and Patrick Sullivan. First of all, congratulations on your excellent work. I was editor of my high school paper, but I did not manage to get the principal fired, unfortunately. Trina, you are co-editor-in-chief. What made you suspicious during your initial interview with Amy Robertson?
I think just some of the words that she used, some of the phrases she said, like perhaps that she had lived in California and Spain and New York and she commuted. Some of those things were glaring. And I think at that point we realized that we had stumbled onto something much larger than any of us.
What do you mean it was glaring?
It didn't seem plausible. It wasn't realistic. And just looking at our educational background, Cortland's, we looked at the website, broken links, accreditation mill, just various Google searches, just the power of simple internet allowed us to draw those really simple conclusions from the information.
Internet, yeah, Google searches that apparently the school board was not capable of. Patrick, at what point did you and your colleagues realize, holy smokes, we got a real story here?
I believe it was once we discovered the Cortland's website, we dug a little bit deeper into the non-functionality of the website itself, and we discovered that there's no phone line or email of anyone we could contact.
Trina, your team presented your findings to school officials before you published. What was their response?
I think initially they had wanted to stick with her. They gave her an ultimatum. If you present the proper transcripts, you will be able to stay on, essentially. And she was unable to do so. And it thus resulted in her resignation.
Patrick, under Kansas law, high school journalists are protected from administrative censorship. But this was a gutsy thing to do. Were you nervous at all?
Yes, I was very nervous. Without the help of our advisor, Emily Smith, and a man from the Student Press Law Center, Frank Lamonti, who helped us understand our rights as a student journalist.
And Trina, you're co-editor-in-chief. Did anyone pressure you not to publish the story?
I think it was just general apprehension about how the community would react. I don't think there were any specific people that would say, like, single me out or anything like that. It was just the idea of the entire school board or the entire administration having certain thoughts about it.
Well, I think you guys are awesome. Patrick, it's your 16th birthday, I understand. Happy birthday. Trina, you're a senior. Are you planning to study journalism? Can we look forward to your application to be an intern here at the Lead someday?
I am planning on joining a college newspaper. I look forward to any future internships in news media.
All right. Well, we look forward to hearing from both of you more in the years to come. Thank you so much. And Patrick, I'm sorry, it's your 17th birthday today. Happy birthday. To both of you, good luck.
Thanks.
I've seen the future of journalism, and it looks great. That's it for The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. Turning you over to Wolf Blitzer in The Situation.
Hey, before you go, we wanted to let you know that we just launched the ability for anyone to advertise on CNN podcasts. You're just a few clicks away from reaching millions of people in a way that you never have before. Advertise for a business, event, or kick off an awareness campaign for your brand. Start today at purewinning.com/CNN. Integrating podcasts into your marketing mix has never been easier. We'll even tell you how to save 15% on your CNN campaigns for the rest of 2017. Go to purewinning.com/CNN to get started.